give a warm welcome to Jonathan Braedley Welch.
Do you guys believe in monsters?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, monsters, you guys do exist, and I'm here to tell you that tonight. Monsters exist, and they can exist in your homes. They can find their way into your homes. They can find their way into your family. They can find their way into your everyday life. And this is the story of the monster that terrorized my family. This monster was 5'7", 120 pounds. Her name was Pam, and she was my sister. Now, Pam and I had quite a bit of time between us. Pam's 12 years older than I am, and she's the next available sibling in terms of the lineage. She's number 5, I'm number 6, so we had 12 years between us, and that meant that throughout my childhood, Pam would babysit me, because it just made sense. I was 4 years old, Pam was 16, she could take care of me. But what I didn't know was what Pam was like before she met her boyfriend John, who she started dating when she was 15 years old. Because I was too young to remember the Pam beforehand. John became Pam's boyfriend, again, when I was about 3. And John was really everything that I grew to hate about growing up in suburban Massachusetts. He was an asshole. He was, simply put, every stereotypical, misogynistic, homophobic, football-playing, like ice house, natty ice swilling jock that you just absolutely, or at least that I absolutely abhor. I don't know about you guys, and I'm not going to judge you if you want to save a few bucks on beer. John had no taste, and John was a jerk. And John started dating Pam, and it was around that time that the monster entered the house. Because through that relationship with John, my sister created some very memorable moments in my childhood, like the time when she got really angry at John and they started punching each other. And domestic violence isn't something that you really want your children around, so my parents started screaming back at them to stop. And my sister pulled out her greatest weapon, which was a giant cooler filled with ice. Again, 5'7", 120 pounds. And she threw it at John, bruising him, cutting his face up, and getting ice all over the place. This is not exactly the example that you want to set for your child, that this is what boyfriends and girlfriends do. Again, Pam would babysit me. And after being babysat by Pam and John, I would say things to my grandmother like, you know, Pam and John share their cigarettes with their friends and they don't smoke the whole thing themselves. Typical behavior, I guess, for teenagers. But other things started to happen too. And as I started to get a little bit older, I didn't have many demands really. My only demands were that we stop watching Sesame Street in time for me to catch the new episode of Designing Women. I was 5. So it became really clear that I was growing up to be the little gay boy that my family had never thought was going to arrive. And since it became so clear, that's when John taught me about the word faggot and taught me that gay people should be vilified and made fun of, and that was kind of his thing. Because he was just a jock, guys. He was just a dumb asshole jock who ended up marrying my sister Pam.
Oh, wow.
When I was 14 years old. And that was around the same time that my other sister moved out and my grandmother passed away. So in this big 3-story house, we lived in this like raised ranch. Do you guys know what that means?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like a split level. So the first floor was really like a half basement, and then you walk up a short flight of stairs into the main living area. The 3rd floor was bedrooms, my parents' bedrooms, because they had separate bedrooms. Another story. We'll talk more about that. So we had this big house. I was alone at the age of 14 with my parents, who were about in their 50s, late 50s, early 60s. So the dynamic was interesting, but I was free. I didn't have to worry about my sister's asshole husband because he took her to live in a trailer park in the other side of the state. Really good. So I was free to grow up. I was free to become a teenager and to start exploring my own pieces of rebellion and hopefully not throw ice chests at people or do other terrible things. And we had watched all sorts of things happen. Pam really started to take on his personality, and she developed an eating disorder, and she developed all sorts of personality disorders, and she just became this insufferable bitch as well to my parents, and it was awful. But she was gone, so I didn't have to worry about dealing with her on a day-to-day basis, only at Christmas and the occasional time when she'd stop over. So I'm in high school, and she gets married, and by the time I finish high school, my senior year, she leaves John. So they had been together for about 12 years, and then their marriage lasted 3. So she moves back home with me. So I have a few months left of high school, and the bitch moves back. Great. She takes her position on the second floor in one of the bedrooms in the house, and I try to just say, just got a few more months till you go to college. You can do this, you can do this. At the same time, I am in school in a very small high school and exploring my sexuality. And I meet a boy named Dan Caraway. Now, Dan Caraway, that's a really sexy name, right? Yeah. Right? It's not his real name. It sounds kind of like his real name, and it's really kind of a hot name. So I want you to picture Dan Caraway. He's kind of, when you hear that name, you might think like someone who's on the cover of a romance novel that you buy at Duane Reade. He has like his shirt open, with muscles, and like hair blowing in the wind, and he's reaching for me, and I'm sitting on a fence, and he's on a horse, and there's a plantation behind us. He didn't look like that. He was actually like the boy next door, and it's a pattern that I've had with every boy I've dated and every boy I've been interested in. I get that like boyish boy next door sort of thing, and Dan embodied that. He was just so cute, and this was in the days with when NSYNC and 98 Degrees and those boy bands were a thing, and Dan looked like he belonged in one of those boy bands. So I was ready as an 18-year-old to just drop my pants, and I did in the dark room at our high school, right? Dan and I were both in this program called Art Major that my high school offered, and we would focus on developing our photographs, working on photography skills, and reserving the dark room after school. And over the course of a few weeks, we would find ourselves hooking up in the dark room, always kind of afraid that maybe somebody was going to come in, because that could happen, because we're just kids in high school. I mean, somebody could just barge into the dark room, but we were still blowing each other. It was time, certainly, as May rolled around, it was time for us to just start to maybe make a move. You know, I mean, again, I was in high school in 2000, 2001. I graduated in 2001. That's when like movies like American Pie and Can't Hardly Wait were big, and you just had this idea that you had to lose your virginity before you left high school. And I would be damned if I got to college and I hadn't explored every element of my sexuality at that point. So I was like, you are coming over to my house on a Saturday night. My parents are always asleep because they're 60 years old. And which I've come to learn since isn't, doesn't mean that you're asleep, so I hate to offend any of the 60-year-olds in the crowd. But anyway, but they slept all the time. I don't know, it has something to do with all the Michelob they drank. So I said, come over. They're up on the 3rd floor. My sister, she's fine. She goes out. She just drinks all the time because, she's 30 and she's trying to relive her teenage years. So she just goes out and gets ripped all the time anyway. We don't have anything to worry about. And it's not uncommon for my friends to come over and hang out down in this basement where we have a little guest bedroom and then a separated living room with a bathroom in it. Like, we can just hang out in there and have sex. It was a really well planned out way to lose my virginity. I hope you're understanding. I am a very methodical person. And so I had Dan come over, and I don't know, I mean, it could be because maybe he watched a lot of porn. Maybe it's because I grew up watching Silk Stockings on USA with moonlighting, but I knew exactly what to do and we just had sex. We just like went for it. And we were in it. And when you lose your virginity or, you know, if you kiss someone even who you just have this pent up energy with, it's like a weight's lifted off your shoulders. I'm sure you all know about that or how that feels. And I was just so relieved. And so before I knew it, there was just no time. There was no time. We just kept having sex. We just kept having sex over and over. And we just kept doing various things and trying things. And it was just this beautiful, beautiful moment. And I was on top of him, to paint a picture. And it's just, God, he's so adorable. And all of a sudden, I just see a door open, and the light pour in. And as the light pours in, I see the dust and the sex in the light. And I see the monster. I see frizzy hair. I notice there's no shirt on. And she has a black eye, and she's 5 foot 720 pounds, and it's my fucking sister Pam. And she walks in to the room, and she didn't know I was gay. And there's a naked man underneath my naked body. So she stands there and starts barreling into the room, tits swagging from side to side. Hair just like one side frizzy, the other side more tame, potentially from a bar fight. And it felt like 5 hours between her walking from the door just into the room, and I grabbed the blanket and just covered Dan Caraway and myself with the blanket, and I just said, "Shut the fuck up." You don't know what she's capable of. And of course, it was easier for Pam that night to just go into the house and go down the small flight of stairs into the guest bedroom and just rip her shirt off, is what I imagined happened, because she was trashed. She had been out of the local bars that night, and she had to use the bathroom and get by me and the boy I was having sex with to get to the bathroom. And she did that thing, because when you walk in on someone having sex, you do one of two things. You either close the door and walk away, which was obviously not an option because she had business to take care of. Or you do the second thing, which is common in my family when anything's taking place that's a little awkward, and you just kind of cover your face and you walk by. And she just walked into the bathroom and peed with the door open, because that's another thing we do in my family. And I just laid there with him, just so embarrassed and so afraid, and she just, as soon as she was done, she just walked out and the door was closed and it was over. And obviously I didn't have an erection anymore. It was just gone like that. So we didn't have any more sex, but I think we kind of got our fill that night. Dan and I graduated high school a couple weeks later, and we talked to each other. We were fine with it. We would acknowledge each other all the time, and we were friendly. But we lost touch after high school. And going back to that day, I was so afraid that Pam, being the monster that she was going to tell my parents. I wasn't sure what she saw. I wasn't sure if she saw that it was a boy. It didn't matter, because I was just so sure that she was going to end up ruining my life by telling my parents that I was having sex with somebody, albeit a boy, in our basement. She never said anything, and she never said anything to me. So a few years later, you know, I'm thinking, and I'm growing up, and I'm realizing she's not so bad. She's eradicating the monster, because the further she got away from John, the more pleasant she was, and the more approachable she was. So I came out to her, and she cried, and she said, "I always knew." And I was thinking, now, okay, So you always knew, was it because like of the designer women thing when I was 5? Or was it because of like, are you gonna have sex with me? I don't know. We never talked about it really, but she always knew. She was crying, she was very emotional. And she said, I love you more because you're gay, which is interesting. But also I'll take it, that's fine. And then our mom died, and when our mom died, she said, I promise you I will check in on you just as much as mom did, and I will be there for you like mom did. Because our dad had died a few years before. And so I felt this horrible sense of loneliness, and Pam was there, and I realized, you know, something else that Sesame Street taught me, and that is that monsters are actually kind of nice. And she's not a monster. She's actually the most wonderful woman I have ever known, but she got rid of that monster. So the moral of the story, guys, divorce is awesome. Number one. Number two, Dan Caraway and I are friends on Facebook now, and he has developed, again, really nicely. So if he ever hears this story and he wants to sleep with me, just message me.